I want you to use your imagination. It all starts in the heart of our home, where the comforting aroma of homemade delights mingle with the clicking of cutlery. In these cozy kitchen moments, my partner in crime, the amazing Philip Grother, and I found ourselves into unscripted, authentic conversations. As we exchanged thoughts over our kitchen table, we realized there is something magical about these spontaneous talks that happen when the dinner table becomes a hub of genuine connections. And that is how the seed was planted. The idea of keeping these unfiltered kitchen magic moments and sharing them with you took roots. Our goal is not to redefine the podcast experience, but take you on a roller coaster ride through the territories of personal growth, emotional intelligence, and the ever-evolving adventure of professional coaching that we are now immersed. So get ready to listen the story behind the mic, the tale of how kitchen table conversations became a reality. These are authentic dialogues. They are the genuine, unfiltered talks that unfold when the microphone is live and real life happens. So now, as we openly invite you, get comfortable and join us. In the meantime, we turn these kitchen conversations into a journey of self-discovery and extraordinary insights. Because sometimes the most magical stories are the ones that happen when you least expect them, and even better if you can keep it to be used to grow and learn. So welcome one more time to this special episode, Kitchen Table Conversations from the Brilliantly Branded Podcast. Welcome to another Kitchen Table Conversation. We are a couple talking about things that happen to our lives. And happen that today we want to share a topic that is very important and very close to our hearts. That is resilience. So Philip, welcome. My love, my partner in crime, welcome. Do you want to introduce yourself for all those that still don't know you?
Yes, and you'll be doing the same afterwards as well.
Sure.
So I'm Philip Grother, and been an entrepreneur since 2015. A full-time entrepreneur with all of the ups and the downs, and we're on a journey together with our audience from the Brilliantly Branded podcast and elsewhere, because these kitchen table conversations span far and wide, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
No, thank you. I would like to clarify something, and this is going to be kind of a holiday season in order for us to give a different, fresh overview to the podcast. Podcasting have the benefit that is allowing you to have a voice. And this time because something that we found in common, coming from different people, it was you are a nice couple. Why you don't talk about your experience and how you have built this up? And I found that so interesting because I think this is another way to give value, to show what is happening in the real life. That doesn't mean that we are going to tell all the things about our relationship. I hope that.
Maybe we'll have to have another kind of episode for another kind of content.
Well, yeah. But the thing is how we can really add value to another couple that wants to listen to other stories and other experiences. Because I think that when you are in a couple, you are building things like in the case that we are building, resilience is something that really is very important to keep in mind and to know what this is about in a couple.
Mm.
So if you want to talk about that a little bit more to explain to put the context, and then we are going to carry on the conversation. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. So for the listeners, the context, there's actually a double context here, right? So on the one hand, we've got resilience in the couple, and we've got resilience as entrepreneurs. And it so happens that we are a couple of entrepreneurs. So being partners in life and crime, what we have come across is, we built our entire journey on, your experiences, on my experiences, and obviously because we've been living different things, we've got different things to bring to the table. And one of the things that we have gotten very, very good at is listening to understand and not to respond, which means that when the other is talking, what we're doing is trying to listen to what they're saying at a very, very deep level. And this is actually to echo what you were saying earlier on about people have told us, well, you should really record your conversations because we tend to have these deep conversations with other people, and here all we're doing is just recording what a normal conversation is for us. And today we've chosen to talk about resilience in entrepreneurship and resilience in our couple purely and simply because that's a topic that obviously keeps coming back again and again and again. But it's something that I think a lot of people take for granted when they see successful people. What they don't realize is how much grit, determination, resilience has gone into that entire journey. And I think that today, talking about it is necessary for everybody to realize that success is not built overnight, and you need a huge amount of grit, determination, resilience in order to be successful, to hope to become successful. And I personally think that resilience is actually it's a muscle that you train more and more and more and more. The other day we spoke about the book Anti-Fragile, and that's something that we can come back to after. What I would like for you to tell me and the audience is a time, maybe during, for example, your sabbatical, when you went on that amazing journey. For those of you who haven't heard the story yet, that's definitely going to be a cool story to tell. Could you tell us about a time where resilience, grit, determination got you to where you are today?
Yeah, of course. One of the things that for me is important as well to understand is what are the definition of success for you? Because I think that success is something that is very different from each individual. So probably after my answer, you can explain what is success for you, and actually connecting the success with the resilience. Personally, I have been feeling a lot of success during these processes of recreate myself. Because for me, resilience is the capacity that you have to recreate yourself and be adaptable to new situations. Probably this is not the definition that you're going to find in Wikipedia or something like that. But for me, it's something like how I have been deciding, because I think that this is inner self. This is something that you define. And how I have been defining, okay, I'm going to do a new step. I'm going to do a new project. I'm going to live in a new country because it's my case. And always having in mind that the first person that I have to believe in is in myself. So I think this all the things are connected to the resilience, and all the things that are happening to you, good or bad, is what really makes and define your character and make you this resilient person, let's say. This is for me more or less what resilience or be resilient is and have been during my journey until now.
You keep getting up again and again and again and again. And that's the thing with entrepreneurship is that a lot of people, when they see individuals becoming successful, they think, wow, they're quote unquote lucky, they made it in some way, shape or form. And actually what they don't see is the amount of times that they, fell flat on their face and they had the courage to get up again and again and again. And this is part of the conversation we were having the other day is understanding that is what it takes. It takes just that one extra time, one extra time, and one extra time. But also those hard moments, they don't define you. As in, if you want to label them failure, if you want to label them, learning experiences, however you want to label them, some people aren't comfortable with the term failure, and a lot of people say, I either win or I learn. There is no failure, which is a school of thought that, to be honest, I actually appreciate that, because certainly in Europe, and if anybody is listening to this in the US, this is something that you don't necessarily even talk about in Europe. Failure is simply not, quote unquote, acceptable, which is very different than in the US, where failure is actually not just an accepted, but it's an expected part of the journey. I mean, there are some investors that won't even invest in founders if they haven't had two massive failures. I'm not saying that that's all investors, but it's super important to understand how people see failure. And when I see people who have gotten up again and again and again and again, that's something that I admire. That's something that I think, wow, you have had the courage, because it is that in the end, isn't it? It's having the courage to get up again and again and again. But also, and this is a conversation that you and I have quite often, it's perfectly okay to have those moments of self-doubt, those moments of, am I doing the right thing? Those, that internal conversation of, am I spending my time on the right thing? And coming back to you and your story, tell us a bit more about how you keep being inspired to carry on doing what you're doing. What keeps you motivated? And by the way, I will come back to your question about my definition of success right after this.
Yeah. Well, I think that one of the most important things in life is the purpose, is the drive. You can really get old and having losing your purpose is having losing your life, having losing the reasons why you wake up every day and make a life, the reasons why there is something that is still producing on you something special to wake up and do whatever you need to do. So for me, I think that this is something that I have been cultivated with me every day across different processes. And those processes is learning. For example, I am a long learning life student. I'm bringing new content every day to my life, learning from other people and feeling inspired from other people as well. You are one of those, for example. And that is something that feeling this inspiration is really keeping this drive, because that allowed me to see the life in a different way, in a way of hope, in a way of I can do many, many other new things. I can generate an impact. So every day I think that it's a decision that I make every day to really continue going, even if the things are not going well, because I cannot say like, yeah, every day is rainbows and unicorns and everything. That is not true. That is the real life. Actually, is comparing. You can compare with the sound when you go to the cardiologist. Your heart have the sounds up and down, up and down, up and down. And when it's going flat, what does it mean? Exactly. So I think that the life is full of these things, up and downs. And let's say that this answer to your question, this is part of my drive. And my purpose actually is as clear as my purpose in life is to show to the people the power of living the now. The living what is happening today, because most of people are living in the past and others are living in the future. But actually all these couple of things are important, but probably the most important is living now and have this drive that will bring you to the future, of course, but not staying always in the past. I can see many people that are coming to me and say, well, that have been happening to me and they haven't healed that wound yet. And having healed that wound is really make them living in the past and don't allow them even to enjoy the present and thinking what is going to happen in the future.
Mm.
So my drive is understand that the now is super, super key in my life to keeping my drive alive and my purpose in the life.
I really like that. Our capacity to live in the now is not only important, but it also can be learnt. It can be cultivated, right? Because we live in an age where it's all click result, click result, click result. And there's an expectation of the instantaneous, of the right here, the right now.
So
The instant result, exactly. And there's that instant gratification that if you can delay that gratification as much as possible, you'll find that if you fall in love with the journey and being able to fall in love with the journey that is happening right here, right now, not regretting all of the things that happened in the past and anticipating all of the things that might happen in the future, and then falling into analysis paralysis, right? That capacity of being able to learn from the past, but let the past go, look into the future so that you can plan ahead, but remain in the present just enough so that you can actually make the most of it. I think that in itself, a lot like resilience that we were saying earlier on, is a muscle. I think that living in the present is also a muscle that you can train, that you need to train. Right? And this is something that I've definitely learned from you, because when we first started building a life together, I was always telling you, I'm living 5 years in the future. I'm living 5 years in the future. Yeah, I'm always living in the future. And what you have taught me, and it's very true, it's good to have big plans. It's good to have big projects in the future. But if you don't make the most of right here, right now, then you're going to get to the end of this particular life that you're going through, and what you will have lived in anticipation of what's going to come, but what's going to come never actually does come, right? Because it's in the future. And if you don't cultivate that idea of living in the present, then naturally you can't. It's impossible for you to ever find peace. And being at peace, having those moments of peace, I think, is probably one of the factors that keeps resilience going. Maybe because we're not just here to ask questions, we're also here to provide elements of reflection. We're not going to provide answers, but one of the ways that you and I remain resilient is that we have those little islands and those little moments of peace, even if we're talking about minutes or hours or days, where we really do think, okay, now I'm present, now I'm breathing, now I'm here, now I am, now. I'm not living in the past, I'm not living in the future, I'm living in the now. Maybe, I think that speaking about this with you now, I'm realizing how important, in order to remain resilient, carry on getting up again and again and again, one of the key factors is actually to be able to live in the present.
Yeah, and I want to make some clarification. And you mentioned that we are just giving our opinions. I mean, what we are saying here is not the law. It's not. I think it's important. No, and I'm saying that because it's all our concepts are based on our experience, our own experience, and how we have been finding those moments of safe place to feeling recharged by the other one, in order for us to feeling this peace that we need to really continue the relationship or keeping a relationship in the good terms, let's say, because when couples in general and when we have, for example, an argument for something, is something is the real life. We are not going to say that no, we never argue.
I promise. We never argue. Yes, we do sometimes have animated conversations. We can call them arguments, we can call them disagreements, we can call them whatever we want. I think there's something very healthy about having healthy disagreements. And those healthy disagreements, it's one of the keys to have a healthy disagreement is to be able to take your ego off the table. You don't need to be right all of the time, right? And this is something that naturally we live in an age where you have to have all the answers. You have to have all the answers to all the questions, and you need to have it all figured out. But the reality is that nobody's got it all figured out, right? And as you go along, you just accept the fact that you don't have it all figured out. I don't have it all figured out, and that's okay because you're a human being. I'm a human being, and c'est la vie. So understanding that both parties don't have it all figured out. Both parties might have some right, some wrong, and it's okay to look in the middle somewhere for a common ground, a commonly acceptable ground, because there are some things that you're going to have a disagreement on, and you can't arrive at an acceptable common understanding. Okay, well that's good because that's a piece of information for your couple. Drawing a parallel between couple and entrepreneurship, a couple is like being with a co-founder, right? One or two or three co-founders. Well, there are going to be some times where you're going to have disagreements, some fundamental disagreements, and it's important for you to know how to quote unquote argue. What does an argument look like in this couple, whether you're talking about in business or in life? And that comes back to listening to understand, not to respond. That's point number one. But also point number two, being able to have the humility of thinking from the other person's perspective. Okay, well, where are you coming from? Where is this coming from? If we're having a conversation about values, if we're having a conversation about, a really fundamental point of view, okay, well, what does life look like from your point of view? And maybe I've got something to learn from you, and maybe you've got something to learn from me. But there's that mutual respect of being able to have that constructive conversation. And I think that sometimes we benefit from not engaging. Sometimes it's best to say, you know what, this conversation is getting a bit animated, it's getting a bit too much. We should probably just hit pause, take a breather, take 5 minutes of total silence for the emotions to come down. And that emotional intelligence is probably something that we need to bake into our couple and into our personal relationships and obviously professional relationships as well. Because in the heat of the moment, you might say something that is you're saying it to score points.
Yeah.
And I think that brings me a rather long way of coming around to this idea of keeping score. And if you try and keep score in your personal life and your professional life, then that is almost, I think, doomed in the sense that you're going to be tallying up the points of how much can I hurt you because you hurt me, and how much can I hurt you when you hurt me. And that ties back to what you were talking about earlier on, which is the wounds that people have. Because you come to the kitchen table with your past. You've arrived with your baggage. I've arrived with my baggage, and you and I, have both been working actively on letting that baggage go, right? And because we've been on this journey of self-development for such a long time, that for us, the concept of letting go is not new, right? But for the listeners, the concept of letting go might actually be something they think, well, it's really, really nice to say, well, just let go. How do you let go? So coming back to, and here's my question for you as well, You know what? Actually, I'm going to be fair because you asked me a question earlier on, which I still haven't answered, which is my definition of success.
Yes.
What we're doing right here, right now, having these conversations, this is in part my definition of success. Being able to learn, being able to engage in super interesting conversations, being able to, no matter what day of the week it is, no matter what month, year, what I'm hoping that success looks like for today and tomorrow into the future is learning, is understanding, okay, I've learned from my mistakes. I've learned from my successes and my failures. Invariably, you're always going to learn more from the things that don't go right than the things that do go right? Because you don't sit down and analyze, okay, well, why did this go right? You just celebrate the win and then you move on.
Yeah.
However, I think there's a huge amount of value in doing a post-mortem, whether it goes right or wrong. But being in this constant state of learning, and then applying that to a new situation, understanding how can I grow as a person, and becoming this is going to sound terribly cliche, but becoming a better person tomorrow than I am today, that's something that I aspire to. But I know that it's not something that I'll ever finish, right? Because if I'm constantly getting better, then that means the journey is never ending.
Yeah.
And so my definition of success is also in part just accepting the journey for what it is, living the here and the now, and being in deep, deep, deep gratitude for what I have, because what I have is absolutely amazing. I've got air in my lungs. Thankfully, I've got access to clean water. Generally, got access to food.
A beautiful couple.
Oh, there is that too. Of course, yes, darling. I'm sorry. I should have started with that. And now you know I'm in trouble. Right? I bow my head. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, success is being able to build something with what you have, and you and I, have a huge amount already, and we've got this incredible, head start on life in general because we've already been through so much, and we've still got so much to see and so much to deliver.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the
Sure,
explanation. I don't know if you have been finished, but I just wanted to say
maybe some more later on.
No, I want to connect the success with something that you said before, that is the score. I mean, when you are keeping the score and connecting that with the couple and the business, because we are in the two worlds at the same time. Actually, I am going to talk about my personal experience since I was little, and it was the fact that I haven't learned how to accept failure.
Mm.
And part of the things that, in many ways, business and love, you want to keep that high score or score all the time, is because you don't want it to fail. You don't want it to be the one that is not the winner. And I am reading now a book, very interesting book from a Mexican journalist, where he's talking about the fact that now in the schools, naturally, just they are starting to do it in India, they are teaching to the kids the fact that the failure, across different examples from different people that have been failure in life and then succeed, how that is important in your life.
Mm.
So I have been learning that across the life, let's say, because I haven't learned that as part of my culture. Or my culture was like, you need to succeed. I mean, failure is not an option. And when I start to go deeper in the terms of analyzing emotions and all this journey that that I have been living, I realized that, for example, when we were kids and we fell down, your mom come and say, no, here is nothing happened. You just stand up, nothing happened. And the lack of actually recognizing that moment that, yes, you fail, you probably have hurt your knees or whatever, and this is a fact, but now you have to stand up and move on. That just little difference that I guess nowadays the couples that have the kids can actually deliver that content to the kids in order for them to start understanding that failure is very important to be included in our mindset as a part of everything. So every time when I am kind of feeling that I am having these failure moments, I am not feeling still not feeling good because I am saying to myself, but why? I mean, you should have to do it in this or that way, and I am not having enough compassion with myself in order to recognize, well, look at all the things that you have been doing, and at least you try. That is the most important thing. You try. Probably you failed, but you try, and next time you're going to do it better. You're going to learn the lesson. So for me, it's important to understand, especially since early age kids, parents to say to the kids, the way that failure is very important to be included in our life.
Thank you very much for sharing that. Because I think it brings the conversation round to a topic that we don't address enough, and that is the acceptability of failure, right? And there's a change of culture that needs to operate within us. I mean, it starts with oneself, right? It's this whole idea of, you know what? You acknowledge that something went wrong, but that something doesn't define the all of you, your entire self. And that's something that we as individuals need to learn for ourselves. But I think that's very much related to people's fear of being judged. Now, one thing that we need to understand when we're talking about the fear of judgment is that we're afraid, the only reason why we're afraid of what other people think is because we've got that internal dialogue, that internal narrative that we're very afraid of, ironically, right? So it's not so much what other people think of us, it's what we are going to think of ourselves and how badly, how cruelly we judge ourselves. And so one of the next keys to building resilience is to have maybe a better internal dialogue with ourselves, because that famous, the famous quote of in an aircraft, before you put anybody else's oxygen mask on, you need to put your own oxygen mask on. You can't help other people until you help yourself. Well, you can't help other people become more resilient until you have yourself become more resilient. And the only way that you can do that is by addressing these really deep, hard topics. One of them is failure. Right? And so failure and success, because there are so many dimensions to the idea of failure and success. Again, defining what is success, we should also define what is failure, right? Yeah. So now you've asked me what my definition of success is. Maybe you would like to give us your opinion, definition of failure. Would you like to try that?
Yeah, of course. Well, if I compare that feeling with something that happened in life, for me, failure is a bitter taste. It's a bitter taste that take me time to digest. So when you eat something bitter, it's not nice, but that remains there not for longer. It's shorter if you know how to really manage that. Mm-hmm. And if I compare that failure, then in the moment that is bitter, because it's the moment that something happened, that I am receiving that, I'm feeling not good, I need the time to start to know what I am going to learn about that failure that have been happening to me. And then for me, the definition of failure is actually how I manage the process to take out the learning and start to put it in practice, that because what I have been learned is that when you don't take measures about something that is happening to you again and again, is continue happening until the moment that you learn from that. And that has been happening to me in many ways, in many occasions. And just in the moment that I have been noticed, well, this is happening to me again, I'm not going to do the same mistake again, then I said, well, lesson learned, and never will that happen to me back, because I already learned the lessons. So for all those listeners that are living the same experiences again and again and complaining, this is happening to me again, why? There is something that still you have to learn about. So my advice will be learn about that things that is happening to you again and again, and then when you learn, will not happen to you anymore.
Yeah, that's the voice of experience right there. I mean, there are so many things that you have been through that you've decided never, ever, ever to live again. And yeah, thank you very much for sharing. And I would actually like to point something out, is that you've gone from defining failure to actually how to get over it, how to get the most out of it. And we also call that the silver lining. You know, the silver lining is when you say there's a silver lining in the cloud or whatever, there's always something positive that comes out of something negative. And so maybe one of the next keys for resilience is actually understanding that even in the most negative situation, there is some positive in there if you choose to see it. Right? And I think that very much like it's moments of happiness, because happiness is not something that you have that is, it's not a continuous state, right? You have these moments of happiness, like these little drops in an ocean of living. And sometimes you have these exceptional moments when you're looking for that silver lining. You also, it becomes a choice, and it becomes easier and easier and easier to see the positive in any negative situation. Because as we very often, you and I very often say, you can't have the light without the dark. You know, the whole principle of yin and yang, right? And it's absolutely impossible to have something that is only bad. It just takes a huge amount of effort to go and find the good in the bad. And that's probably why so few people actually do it, because it is so difficult, right? And that mental gymnastic of, okay, I'm going through a really, really hard moment right here, right now. What's the lesson that I need to learn? What is the universe telling me? You know, why do I keep getting myself in this situation? That's point number one, asking ourselves the question. What's the lesson that I need to learn? Point number two. And then what positive can possibly come out of this situation that then builds resilience, builds learning, builds grit, builds determination. And that whole principle that I mentioned earlier on about being anti-fragile. And so for those of you who haven't read the book yet, very much recommend that book called Anti-Fragile. And the whole principle of anti-fragile systems is systems that get better and more resilient, quote unquote, the more stress they get under. So fragile systems break easily, and then rigid systems, they will eventually break if you put them under enough pressure. Whereas anti-fragile systems, the more stress you put under them, the better they will become, the more adaptable they will become. And that needs to ring a bell with all of us, because we are, as human beings, we are fundamentally anti-fragile.
I love that. I think that I am kind of a rock right now.
Yeah, the thing is that a rock, if you hit it hard enough, it will break, right? And it's great that you say that, because you're very, very anti-fragile because of everything that you have been through, right? And it's a perfect example of, and it illustrates actually for our listeners, if you take the idea of a rock, if I take a hammer, break it, it's going to break in two. Whereas you're what we call, and this is going to be slightly technical, a non-Newtonian fluid. And
yeah, this is a bit technical.
It's a bit technical. A non-Newtonian fluid, like for example, custard. Custard is actually a non-Newtonian fluid. So when you hit it, it becomes robust, but then it's a liquid, right? And that's the way that we are. Right? I understand purists out there. Please don't beat me up. But it's to give the example of you being adaptable, flexible, agile. So maybe adaptability and agility is also part of resilience, grit, and determination.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I think that we can spend hours and hours, and we are going to divide these episodes for shorter ones. I mean, like a kind of 45 1 hour episode. And we already are 40 minutes speaking.
Really? Sounds nice when you're having.
So, yeah, it's true. But I think it will be very nice for us to do kind of a summary of the things that our listeners can take out of this conversation. I mean, our main topic, resilience, but we have been touching different things. And I think that we will really make a lot of value, give a lot of value to our listeners to do this time. So what about that?
So the summary is going to be about 40 minutes long.
Okay, good.
I am joking, of course. My key takeaway, because summing up the entire conversation about resilience, grit, determination, and really understanding what it takes, I think that one of the big learnings, teachings that you have given me is living in the now and how important appreciating the right here, right now. What are you living? Appreciate the moment. Whether it's good or bad, but live in the now, be present. And that will help you listen to what the universe is telling you. So that's one of my takeaways. I've got a few, but I'd like to hear from yours as well.
Well, another takeaway from me is learning the tolerance to failure and learn that failure is not something bad. In the contrary way, when you are having this failure, that means that you are trying. And that is something that really fill in your life in the way that if you know how to manage that and take the lessons learned about that situation, you will go in one step forward every day.
Absolutely. Building on what you just said, learning to even appreciate those moments of lessons learned. In one of our next episodes, we will have to talk about this idea of forgiveness. And it's perfectly okay for you to live what you're living. And forgiveness it has to be a topic, but you can't become resilient unless you learn forgiveness of yourself and forgiveness of other people. So that'll be another.
Don't spoil the episode, please.
Oh, don't worry. If people have come this far, you know what to look forward to. So, one last takeaway from you?
For me, well, I think that resilience applies in a couple that happen that work together as well is part of what is happening all the time, redefining ourselves and help us to realize that the life is not plain. The life is full of up and downs. The life is full of challenges in many ways. And knowing how to deal with that as part of your day-to-day life, be less fragile, as you all said. And I love that because one of the things that I have been learned is get stronger based on what I have been living every day. And that doesn't mean that I have had a terrible life. The thing is that I have been living things in my life that have been given to me a lot of value because I have been accepting that things that happen to me are communicating something. So part of the thing is paying attention to what is happening to you, not just I don't know what that's happening to me, and so go ahead and don't pay attention. You just go ahead. It's why the things have been happening. So I think the part of the resilience in a couple is probably stop and doing these kind of conversations, that probably we are going to have another episode talking about communication. And it's how you are not talking about certain topics because it's not necessary. But then when you realize it's actually very important to stop and say, well, look, this happened. I want to express how I am feeling. And then when you have this exchange, you create this safe place that you know, and it's very important for the couple to say, well, express what you are thinking, that is a safe place. You are not going to judge. I'm not going to judge. Well, that's been my personal experience with you, that I am so grateful about that. So, anyways, it is a lot of content that we can deliver on the podcast. So, please.
I think we're going to have to cut this one up into like three mini ones. So you've already opened another Pandora's box, which is this idea of no judgment of oneself, judgment of other people, and also clear communication. And I think that we're going to have to wrap this conversation up just there. Although I do feel like there is an entire episode on the importance of good communication in the couple and in between 2 founders, 3 founders, 4 founders, purely and simply because that good communication, exceptional communication skills are vital if we want to have a long-term sustainable relationship. There needs to be that understanding of what good communication is and non-judgment. But that'll be for another episode. So
for another episode, exactly.
On that note, thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you for having me. Having me.
As a couple.
I'm kidding.
Of course you are.
Thank you. I'm really loving this episode, and I think that are going to give a lot of value and getting a little bit into our relationship without coming to here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure having you here.
It's very nicely had.
As we wrap up our first kitchen table conversation, we hope you have enjoyed this intimate exploration into the world of self-discovery and honest conversations. This has been a special edition of the Brilliantly Branded podcast, and we want to express our gratitude for joining us on this journey. While we will back with our regular programming to continue exploring the power of branding and empowerment, keep an eye out for these special episodes. They will pop up from time to time, like hidden gems in our podcast. We appreciate your support, and remember, the exploration of knowledge and self-growth is a journey that never ends. Until the next time, and please, stay brilliantly branded.